existe uma lenda que esse campo como ele, campeões com potencial para ser o próximo rei dos piratas, mas
Salve, salve, meu parceiro. Tô iniciando aí mais um live coding, né? E tamo junto, cara. Não tem nem muito pra onde correr, não é mesmo? E é isso.
uma aura. Quer saber mais? Fala galera, eu vou difusar ali com mais um vídeo pra vocês. Tô vendo aqui, olhinho desse tamanho, bochecha corada. O melhor não tem como. Não tem como esse cara tão realmente incrível. Força ao lado, aonde esse pirata estava precisavam do rock. Esse capítulo vem realmente para citar a origem dos piratas rock. Como eles se reuniram. Começa com o veio, vai. Pois é, tudo explicadinho para você. Até o final, tem muita coisa legal. Você novo no canal, vai na maciota, beleza? Se você é a pior geração, dando um like para não perder o vídeo. E antes disso, confere um recadinho para vocês. Meus amigos, vocês, como eu, estão interessados no universo da tecnologia, têm interesse em começar nessa área, ou seja, lá para ganhar dinheiro, eu quero indicar para vocês uma das versões mais aguardadas do ano, que é a versão mais madura, que é mesmo, conhecimento gratuito, pode mudar a sua vida hoje. Oportunidade perfeita para quem quer ir do Excel, análise de dados, e não usar ferramentas eficientes. São 5 dias de imerso com aulas exclusivas desenvolvidas especialmente para você consolidar todo o seu conhecimento em programação, com aulas 100% práticas, um cronograma pensado para quem está começando. Você vai aprender do zero como usar a análise de dados e no final, olha só, vai desenvolver seu próprio dashboard interativo com dados reais do mercado de trabalho em IA. Conteúdos são construídos por especialistas referenciados da área. Então a imersão vai contar com a possibilidade sozinha.
Foda, meu parceiro. Foda, foda.
Aproveita, galera. Então já está acabando a tempo limitado. Não perca tempo de começar o seu mergulho em tecnologia de análise de dados.
Dá um pouquinho hoje, aí, mano. Ah, não, né? Tem o quê? Peraí, pra onde correr? Como que eu vou fazer pra mostrar, né? Boa pergunta. Questionamento aí.
Aí, parece uma chuteira de.
Ultimate. Voltar pro LinkedIn Learning. Aí, LinkedIn Learning. Porra do. Pô, tinha que dar mensageria também, né, mano? RabbitMQ, essas fitas. Ali eu tô pedindo pra cacete. Hoje é a terceira vez que eu faço uma entrevista que o nego pede mensageria, velho. Mensageria, CleanArch, microservice. Foda, nego. Mano, esse bagulho de smartwatch é maneirinho, velho. Gamifica a vida aí. Eu não sei como, caralho, ele acha que eu gastei isso tudo de calorias sem fazer porra nenhuma, mas tá bom. Sei o quê.
lá, projeto. A nossa história começa com o lote de duas pessoas.
Porra, futuro da Microsoft, caralho. Esse computador aqui tá foda, meu amigo. Que isso, pessoal.
Temos o narrador dizendo que os ataques principais a loucura de atacar uma criança. O Rock é um dos personagens favoritos da semana. Não só pela mas essa sugestão chamada não experimente o plot até o reforço de mais experimentos para que quem faça a origem não consegue ver que o fato do narrador diria que algo pode ser ganhar uma visão um pouquinho ganhando
Não sei, salve sim, meu. Salve, viado. Caralho, qual foi? Dá-lhe o papo, caralho. Porra. Negócios. Learning. Ah. Colhi numa festa com a minha mulher. Foi sim, cara. Porra, aproveita bastante, viado. Estou off. Tamo junto, cara. Porra. Nós pra caralho, mano. Aproveita bastante aí, viado. Porra. Fico feliz. Tô vindo aqui avisar, papo reto. Verdade. Caralho. Sextou, porra. Tá maluco. Esquece. Porra. Hoje também só estudar nessa porra. Nem rolar o boteco de qualquer forma. Não sei, boa live, bola. Tamo junto, viado. Caralho. É nóis, tá ligado? Se o molde tá, vai se fuder, pô. Maluco. Bagulho. Aí é que funciona, vai entender.
Vamos falar que é uma coisa toda eu já li esse capítulo 10 isso é verdade. Eu volto falando primeiro, o modo descontra é o rock. Ele tá uma bola, um lugar mais some questions about the deployment rock option in app services. Outra coisa é be sure to know when to use virtual machines in the cloud solution. We also would prefer to get some questions about that in 100.
for instance, I'm going to click on create, and then I'm going to navigate to the compute category and select one of those templates, say Windows Server, and finally create. So I strongly suggest you understand different options that you have when creating a virtual machine. Of course, I need to set the name, say one or something. And one of those options that is quite important for the AC900 exam is this, because you can get a question along the lines of, you have many virtual machines created with the same size, would they cost the same at the end of the month? Well, actually, the answer is going to be no, because those virtual machines, it doesn't matter if you're using the same size, because those virtual machines could be using different disk. So, for instance, one virtual machine could be using a premium SSD and another one could be using an HDD or something. So, because of this fact, those virtual machines are going to cost differently at the end of the month. Okay, let me go back to the resource group because I'm not going to deploy this virtual machine. And let's say virtual machine skill set. This is another service for creating virtual machines. However, virtual machine skill sets let you create and manage a group of identical load balance virtual machines. So this is great for creating a cluster or something of virtual machines. So again, you need to set the name and select some options. I strongly suggest you understand the different options that you have. Okay, so as you can see, this is quite similar to the virtual machine template. However, here you're creating a number of virtual machines. Okay, and finally, be sure to understand availability sets, which are designed to ensure that virtual machines get staggered objects. Okay, let's go to the practice question. To plan and deploy some virtual machines, applications running on the virtual machines need to continue working after a single data center failure. Be careful about that, okay? Data center failure. You plan to deploy the virtual machines to two virtual machine scale sets. Does this meet the goal? Well, actually, it could be meeting the goal. However, it doesn't say anything about availability zones, so this could be no, since it's not mentioning anything about availability.
Parando pra pensar, não sei nem se eu,
And one of those
posso
options
mostrar essa porra
that
aí,
is
né?
quite
Isso aqui é
important for
foda.
yes, because you
Caralho.
can get a question along the lines of,
Hum.
you have many virtual machines created with the same size, would they cost the same at the end of the month? Well, actually, the answer is going to be no, because those virtual machines, it doesn't matter if you're using the same size, because those virtual machines could be using different disk. So, for instance, one virtual machine could be using a premium SSD and another one could be using an HDD or something. So, because of this fact, those virtual machines are going to cost differently at the end of the month. Okay, let me go back to the resource group because I'm not going to deploy this virtual machine. And let's say virtual machine scale set. This is another service for creating virtual machines. However, virtual machine scale set lets you create and manage a group of identical load balance virtual machines. So this is great for creating a cluster or something of virtual machines. So again, you need to set the name and select some options. I strongly suggest you understand the different options that you have. Okay, so as you can see, this is quite similar to the virtual machine template. However, here you're creating a number of virtual machines. Okay, and finally, be sure to understand availability sets, which are designed to ensure that virtual machines get staggered objects. Okay, let's go to the practice question. To plan and deploy some virtual machines, applications running on the virtual machines need to continue working after a single data center failure. Be careful about that, okay? Data.
Hum. Não, não.
Center failure. You plan to deploy the virtual machines to two virtual machine scale sets. Does this meet the goal? Well, actually, it could be meeting the goal. However, it doesn't say anything about availability zones, so this could be no, since it's virtual machine will always look the same. Remember what I told you? The answer is no, because the disk could be different. Okay. Next one. If you stop a virtual machine, you still have to pay for storage stuff. And here the answer is going to be yes, because it doesn't matter if the virtual machine stops. You still have to pay for the storage account that is being used by the virtual machine. So be careful about that. Okay? Azure Virtual Desktop is a desktop and app virtualization service that runs in the cloud. You did get some questions about this in your 8900 exam, so let's get started. Azure Virtual Desktop enables you to use a cloud-hosted version of Windows from any location. It allows you to separate the operating system, data, and apps from local hardware. In other words, the OS is running on the cloud and not on your local machine. And of course, it works with all applications and it works in all devices. For instance, you could be running Windows 11 on your iPad or your Android tablet. Here's a practice question for you. Azure Virtual Desktop supports both desktop and app virtualization. And as I mentioned, the answer is going to be yes. This is one of the benefits of this particular service. Containers are lightweight processes that give you higher compute density. And also they give you portability and a lot of different benefits for cloud native applications. Be sure to understand the differences between containers and virtual machines before taking the 8900. One of the services that you can use in Azure for running containers is Azure Container Instance. So here I'm going to click create and search for container instances. I'm going to click create. And here in this page, I can set the container name. And finally, I can set the container image name. Azure Container Instances is for rapidly running a container instance. Okay? Another service is Azure Kubernetes service. So here, I'm going to search for Kubernetes service. And I'm going to click on this template and finally create. You don't need to know anything about Kubernetes before taking the 8900 exam. The only thing that you need to know is that Kubernetes is a container orchestrator, because when you have a number of container instances, you need something to manage. Okay, an Azure Kubernetes service is a managed service for running Kubernetes in the cloud. So here, there are many different options that we can set when deploying a Kubernetes cluster. But actually, again, you don't need to know anything about Kubernetes before taking your exam. Don't worry about that. Okay? Here's a practice question for you. You plan to use containers in your company. Which
You plan to use containers in your company. Which two services would you use? Azure Container Instance, Azure Kubernetes Service.
two services? Azure Blob Storage, container instances, Kubernetes service, or virtual desktop? Well, actually, the answer is going to be container instances, and of course, Kubernetes service.
Of course.
While virtual machines give you maximum control of the hosting environment, some cloud solutions could benefit from a platform as a service solution, such as Azure App Service. With Azure App Service, you can build, deploy, and scale apps mostly for web applications and also for web APIs. So here in the portal, I'm going to click on create, and then I'm going to scroll down here to find the web category. And let's find web app template, and then click on create. And here we're going to set a name. For instance, I want to use 8900 exam prep. And another option, as you can see here on the screen, is the publish option. In other words, what is your source for your application? Is it code, or is it a Docker container? Or maybe you want to host a static web app. In this case, I'm going to select code. And here, you should know that there are many different languages and frameworks that we can use to deploy our application. So for instance, I'm going to select .NET 6 and I want to use Linux instead of Windows. Be sure to understand the differences between those two, of course, not only in terms of the operating system, but in terms of cost. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to select South Central US. And finally, remember that a app service needs a plan. In other words, the plan is going to be the hardware configuration that you want to use for that app service. Actually, you can deploy many different app services in the same app service plan. So I'm going to select the default, and actually I'm going to click on review plus create. So I'm ready to deploy this app service. And finally, I'm going to click on create and wait for the portal to deploy this application. I'm going to pause the video here, and after a while, this app service is going to be deployed, so we can go to the resource. And here, we're ready to deploy an application. Actually, if you navigate to this public URL that was created, you can see that this is a sample application that the Azure App Service template created for you. Okay, so let's go back to the portal. Maybe you'll get some questions about the deployment log option in App Services, so be sure to know about this. And also the options for the deployment center. The key takeaway of Azure App Services is that you can deploy scale apps, mostly web applications and also web APIs. Also remember that an Azure App Service will require an Azure App Service plan. Azure Functions allow you to create on-demand serverless code that is completely manageable. Some of the most important features of Azure Functions is that they can scale dynamically, they need to be triggered to execute, and they can be connected to different data sources and targets through binding. So here in the portal, I'm going to click on create, and then I'm going to search for function app. This is the template that we use in the portal for creating this kind of application. In the create function app webpage, you can see that I need to set the function app name. In this case, DC900 extract function app or something. And similar to the app services, you can choose from code or Docker container for your publish option. In this case, actually it doesn't matter. I'm going to choose code. You can choose from different runtime stacks such as .NET, Node, Python, Java, and some others. In this case, I'm going to select .NET 6. And finally, you can choose your region. In this case, I'm going to select South Central US. You can also choose your operating system. Even though you're not going to manage the underlying infrastructure, this is helpful because you, of course, need to choose from those two different operating systems for your function and application. So in this case, I'm going to choose Linux, and you can also set the plan type, which is by default the consumption plan. This is the serverless option of Azure Functions. However, you can also choose a app service plan if you want to have a more predictable cost at the end of the month. So I'm gonna go back to the consumption plan, and if we go to the next option, you can see that we need to set the storage account that this application will need. So in this case, this is going to create a new storage account. And well, finally, you can create on review, plus create, and deploy this function application. Actually, I'm not going to do this. Just remember the differences between Azure Functions and Azure App Services and the relationship between Azure Functions and the Azure App Services file. It's very likely that there will be many questions about networking.
Galera do código. Vai o homem aí. Salve, Candinho. Tamo junto, mano. Cabelo novo F. Um tapa no visual, né? Tá louco. Ah, vai tomando.
Services in your 18900 account. So be sure to study this specific topic and practice the questions in this video. There are several networking services in Azure. However, two of the most crucial ones are the Azure Virtual Network and Network Security. A virtual network enables Azure resources to communicate with each other.
Galera do código. Coisas boas. Pô, mano, tamo na mesma ainda. Tamo na mesma. Tô gravando uma série aí de C Sharp, né? Do básico ao infinito. Já tenho o primeiro vídeo pronto, que é falando do C Sharp em si. Aí vou gravar o segundo, que é falando do .NET e por aí vai. Tá ligado? Vou até te consultar por algumas paradinhas. Mas eu acho que tá ficando sucinto. Maneiro. Mas é isso. Hum, merda. Ah, goleiro do código é fera. É, mano, hoje eu fiz uma entrevista pro BT. Só a primeira etapa, por enquanto. Aí a entrevista técnica vai ser segunda. Porra, tô botando mó fé, fi. Tá maluco. Se o pai entra no circuito de banco, fudeu. Fi. Galera do código, entrevista do quê? BTG Pactual, porra. O banco, caralho. Pra Dev Júnior. Porra, mó fita, mano. Galera do código, tô ligado. Porra, vai tomando. André Silva. Oi, meu amor. Tá dormindo aí, é? Tô nada. Ô, reflexivo, reflexivo. É.
The internet and on-premises network, you can have multiple IP address spaces and multiple subnets. A network security group works like a firewall, so you can filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network with a network security group. You can attach one or more network security groups to individual subnets within the virtual network. A network security group contains security rules that allow or deny inbound network traffic to or outbound network traffic from several types of Azure resources. For example, I have this network security group that I created beforehand. And as you can see here on the screen, I have some default rules that were created by Azure when I deployed this network security group. So as you can hear, there are some default rules already in place. Also, be sure to understand how to create a new rule and what are some of the different settings that you can use, such as sources.
André Silva, para de tirar meleca. Oxe, tem que tirar, né? Tem que sair de algum lugar, né, meu filho? Vou deixar aqui. Porra, é essa?
Destinations, protocols, and priorities. Other networking services that you should know about are the VPN gateway, which is a service that allows you to encrypt traffic between an Azure VNet and an on-premises location over the public internet. The Azure Express route, which extends on-premises networks into Azure over a private connection, and Azure DNS, which is a global network of DNS name servers using any class networking. Finally, I strongly suggest you study this side-to-side VPN connection and also the point-to-site VPN connection because you can get some questions about those in your exam. Let's get started with some practice questions. If you plan to deploy an Azure virtual machine, you need to control the ports that users on the internet can use to access the VM. What should you use? Of course, this is an example of a network security group kind of question because
tá assistindo. É um curso para uma certificação de cloud. É um curso ensinando a usar uma plataforma de cloud, tá ligado? É computação. Porra, é um curso. Curso. Parece, eu vou colocar aí o vídeo que te mandei do pingo tentando pegar o próprio rabo, vai dar mó engajamento. Porra, só que no começo da internet só tinha vídeo de gato, né? Pra entender. Graças a
You
Deus
can associate a
evoluímos
network
disso.
security group to a VNet software. The true or is it false? Actually, this is true. You
True.
can assign a
Yes.
network security group to a subnet. And this other question is, you can associate a network security group to a VNet. Is it true or is it false? Actually, this is false because you cannot assign a network security group to a VNet directory. Next one, application security groups can be included in network security group rules. Is it true or is it false? Yeah, actually, you can do that. You can add application security groups when you define a network security group. Next one, you need to ensure that a VM named VM1 is accessible from the internet over HTTP. What should you do? Modify the Azure Active Directory group, or run Azure Advisor, or modify a network security group.
Eu vou
Yeah,
dizer.
you're right. Modify network security group.
Rio que sai, salve Rio que sai. Tudo tranquilo, meu parceiro? Opa, virou pleno, man. Virei tem uns meses já, mano. Só que mudei o. Só fui mudar agora na live. Desde o código, você viu o vídeo do Codicom, algo assim, do Sênior sem A versus Júnior com? Não, vi essa porra não, velho. Manda aí que nós assistimos, pô. Opa.
You need to modify.
Mas o Rio que sai, se tudo der certo, vou voltar a ser Júnior, mano. Só que numa empresa maior, se Deus quiser. Se Deus quiser, vamos arrumar uma vaguinha aí na empresa grande aí. Pô, momento. Bem melhor. Rio que sai, excelente, man. Boa, parabéns. Tamo junto, viado. Gratidão. Nós, caralho.
The network security group allow connections.
After created. Yes.
TCP port 8080 on the VM after you create it. Yeah, you can do that. Remember that you're going to get some default rules. However, you can add new rules you need to. A network security group blocks all network traffic by default. Remember those default rules? So the answer here is false. A network security group always includes both inbound and outbound security rules. Is it true or is it false? Yeah, actually, I showed you that in the photo. Azure automatically routes traffic between subnets in a virtual network. This is true. Actually, that's one of the features of subnet. Next one. To ensure that a VM cannot connect to other virtual machines, the VM must be deployed to a separate VNet. True or is it false? Yeah, actually, if you need some kind of isolation between virtual machines, you can deploy a virtual machine in another virtual network. What's the function of a site-to-site VPN? Remember that I told you to study that site-to-site VPN connection? Well, the answer here is provide a connection from an on-premises VPN device to an Azure VPN gateway. It looks like the first option is Azure Express Route, and the last one is point-to-site VPN. Again, remember to study those topics as well. It's a safe bet to think that you'll get a number of questions about storage in your 8900.
Right there we are.
So be prepared about that. You should be able to identify the differences between the storage accounts that you can use in Azure, their supported storage services and redundancy options as well. And of course, you should be able to identify the different standard endpoints that all the different storage services. So finally, you should be able to identify and understand the limits of Azure storage accounts and the services. So here are some practice questions for you. The first one is data is replicated 3 times within the primary record. Is it true or is it false? Actually, this is true. Data in an Azure storage account is always replicated 3 times in the primary region. Next, data is backed up automatically to another Azure data center. Well, actually, this is false. You have to configure that. Azure is not going to back up automatically the data to another data. And finally, an Azure storage account can contain up to 5 terabytes of data. Well, actually, this is false because the limit is higher than that. Azure Storage has different access tiers that you can use to store your blob data in the most cost-effective way. Those tiers are hot tier, full tier, and archive. So the first one, hot tier, is for data that is accessed or modified frequently. The second one, or full tier, is for data that is infrequently accessed or modified. And finally, the archive tier is for data that is rarely accessed. So let me show you some things related to this in the Azure portal. So here we are in the Azure portal, specifically in the create a storage account place. So as you can see, if we navigate to the advanced tab, you can see that we have the access tier option. So you can select hot or cool from here. What about archive? Well, actually, the archive access tier can only be set at the blob level and not on the account level. So if we go to this other tab that I have here, you can see that I'm using this storage account that I created beforehand. And if I navigate to the files container, you can see that I have this cool small JPEG file, and I can change the tier I click on this change here button, and here I can select archive. And if I click on save, this will be in the archive here. Let's now practice some questions. Data stored in the archive access here must be rehydrated before the data can be accessed. Is it true or is it false? Actually,
Yeah.
this is going to be true. Next one, hot access here is recommended for data that you access modified
Yes.
frequently.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, that's actually the use case of the hot here. So this is true. And finally, the cool access here is recommended for long-term backup. Is it true or is it false? Actually,
False.
this is false. This is the archive here use case. It's paramount to understand the redundancy options that Azure has. Be sure to study this in detail before taking your 18900 exam. And the first one is the locally redundant storage. With this option, data will be replicated 3 times within a single data center in the primary region. The second one is zone redundant storage. So in this case, data will be replicated synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region. The next one is geo redundant storage. With this option, data will be copied synchronously 3 times within a single physical location in the primary region, and then your data will be copied asynchronously to a single physical location in the secondary region. So be sure to understand this. Data will be replicated to another region. And there's also a read access version of this, which is read access geo redundant storage. Finally, geo zone redundant storage. With this option, data will be replicated synchronously across 3 Azure availability zones in the primary region using DRS, and then your data will be copied asynchronously to a single physical location in the secondary region. And there's also a read access version of this, which is read access geozone redundant storage. Here's a practice question for you. How many copies of data has an Azure storage account that uses locally redundant storage, or LRS? And the answer is 3. Next, with geo-redundant storage, data is replicated synchronously 3 times in the primary region, then replicated asynchronously to the secondary region. Yeah, that's actually how geo-redundant storage works. So the answer is true. Let's describe the different storage services you can find in Azure Storage. The first one is Azure Blob, which is a massively scalable object store for text and binary data. You can store any kind of files, such as multimedia files or video files or backup data or whatnot. It also includes support for big data analytics through data lake storage Gen 2. The next one is Azure Files, which is a managed file share for your cloud and on-premises environment. You can have a file share and then synchronize your data between your on-premises servers and the cloud. With Azure Queues, you can send messages between applications, a very common pattern when we design applications. So we can use Azure Queues for that. Azure Table Storage is a service that stores non-relational structured data. So we can use that instead of a relational data. This is very common in cloud native applications. And finally, Azure Guest, which is a block level storage for volumes that are used in Azure Virtual Machine. Here's a practice question for you. Azure Blob Storage is a new data store, storage service optimized for large objects, file share, or a key attribute data store. And of course, the answer is the storage service optimized for large objects. Queue data store, that's the description of Azure Queues. File share is for Azure files, and key attribute data store is the description of Azure Table Store. There are 3 main tools for moving files in Azure.
André Silva, eita, com programa. Porra nenhuma. Cansado, velho, caralho. Vou fechar a live e descansar, velho. Papo reto. Triste, triste. Mas ainda temos domingo, né? Live domingo. Foda. É, fazer isso. Isso, né? Gratidão a quem brotou aí, quem mandou mensagem. Nos vemos domingo, senhores. Fique com Deus. Bom descanso. Até outro dia.